The colossal squid is a creature that is not to be confused with the giant squid, which is similar but slightly smaller. These guys live in the darkest, coldest depths surrounding the waters of Antarctica. This creature lives up to its name as it reaches an average of 46 feet in size and it weighs around 500 kilograms, with the females being the largest of the species. They also have large tentacles equipped with suckers that have little razor hooks on them to better latch onto its prey, so let's hope it's not you. Its diet mainly consists of large fish such as the 7-foot Patagonian toothfish and small ones, and some even consume their own kind. But they've also been known to try and consume even larger prey like sperm whales, who often have been seen with scars attributing to the battles they must have faced. They're colossal, they're scary, and they're ambitious. What more could you want from a sea monster? Only 2 specimens have ever been collected, with the second being found recently in 2014, so on top of how frightening they are, they're also extremely elusive. In our number 9 spot today we have the scalloped hammerhead shark. These sharks of course belong to the hammerhead family, and the main feature is their oddly shaped heads. These guys are a coastal pelagic species, and their eyes and nostrils can be found at the ends of the tips of their head extensions. These sharks like to use the shore as a breeding ground, and their young have an incredibly high metabolic rate, which means that they need a ton of food or else they will starve. These guys are quite notable for their large and complex brains. They have quite high levels of cognitive capabilities, and they're often really socially intelligent. They have complex migratory patterns and habitat relationships, and they are very athletic and clever when it comes to capturing prey. Nothing better than a super smart, extremely hungry shark. Their brains are great for the species in a multitude of ways of course, but especially in terms of reproduction. Because of their social intelligence, it helps them to seek out the fittest members of the species to procreate with. Unfortunately, as of this year however, the scalloped hammerhead shark is now listed as critically endangered, with the main cause for the population decline being overfishing. They are over-harvested because of their large size, as well as the fact that apparently their fins have a high fin needle content, and so they are sold for $100 to $120 US per kilogram. In our number 8 spot today we have tiger sharks. Tiger sharks are a species of shark that are the only surviving member of their genus. These macro predators can grow to be quite large, reaching lengths of over 5 meters or 16 feet and 5 inches. They're usually found in tropical and temperate waters, and their tiger name comes from the dark stripes that can distinctly be seen running down its body, although these marks do fade as the sharks mature. Tiger sharks live mostly solitary lives, and they are nocturnal hunters. They are well known for having quite the variety of prey, which includes crustaceans, fish, seals, birds, squid, turtles, sea snakes, dolphins, and even other smaller sharks. Unfortunately, these sharks are nearing a point of being a threatened species due to finning and fishing by humans, but it is thought that the Bermuda Triangle might be home to a secret sort of breeding ground for these guys. Hopefully, if this is the case, we can find a way to help protect the area so that the species can once again thrive. After the great white shark, tiger sharks are the second in line when it comes to the most recorded fatal attacks on humans, but although that sounds terrifying, these events are extremely rare. I learned that from the documentary that I watched. In our number 7 spot today we have the deep sea lizardfish. Deep sea lizardfish are a small family of deep water fish who are related to the telescope fish. These guys have flat heads and curved, barbed teeth, and they grow up to 78 centimeters or 31 inches in length, which makes them a pretty moderately sized fish. They prefer to stay at depths of 1,600 meters or 5,200 feet, and they're actually one of the world's deepest living apex predators. These lizardfish are known to eat anything that comes their way, including other fish of their own kind. Despite the lack of light in the depths of the ocean, these guys have really large eyes and pupils, and their vision is actually really important for their prey detection, as their well-developed eyes allow them to see any residual or bioluminescent light. Not a lot is known about their reproduction habits, but one thing that is known is that deep sea lizardfish have both male and female reproductive organs, which is thought to be an adaptation to low population density. In our number 6 spot today we have the flying spaghetti monster. I know, it sounds a little silly, but I swear this creature really does exist. This deep sea creature is a species of siphonophore that can usually be found in the Atlantic Ocean. While these guys appear to be one organism, they're actually a colonial organism, which means that they're composed of many medusoid and polypoid zooids. Zooids are multicellular units that develop from one single fertilized egg, and they combine to create create functional colonies like the flying spaghetti monster. In our number 5 spot today, we have the faceless CUSK eel. Anything that's called faceless certainly can't be good, and this eel is absolutely no exception. These guys don't have a face, and they honestly look like the dementors of the deep sea. The first time one of these was found was in 1973 when oceanographers aboard the HMS Challenger discovered it, but for a century, no one else came across one of these guys. Perhaps it's because they like to make their home in the icy waters located 13,000 feet below the surface of the ocean. Just a few years ago, when these guys were sort of rediscovered, one of the leaders of the expedition, Tim O'Hara, told The Guardian that, quote, "It looks like 2 rear ends on a fish." Really. Apparently, the mouth of these guys sits underneath its body and can extend out to catch food before disappearing back inside its own body. It's kinda cool, kinda gross. In our number 4 spot today, we have the fangtooth fish. The fangtooth fish has a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth, perfect for clutching just about any size of prey in its jaw. That's right, any size. They live in the deepest parts of the ocean, the deepest having been recorded around 16,000 feet. That is until they just so happen to feel like migrating up to the surface for a little vacation. Unlike a lot of other deep-sea dwellers, fangtooths do not have any bioluminescent organs to attract their prey. That is because they're not the sit and wait kind of predator, and instead they seek out their lunch using their excellent sense of smell. They are more active than most deep-sea dwellers and heavily rely on any light that may sink into their dark home. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Pacific viperfish. The Pacific viperfish can be found at different areas in the ocean, depending on the time of day. They usually like to stay in the baffle zone, which is about 100 meters to 400 meters below the surface of the ocean, but during the nighttime, they will sometimes rise up into much shallower water because there is more food for them to eat. It's easy to pick out which fish is a viperfish because of the fact that its jaw is sticking out forward, and then they have those extra long pointy teeth. The Pacific viperfish is predatory and mostly eats other fish, but it will also chow down on crustaceans, plankton, and shrimp. This fish can grow to be about 1 foot long, and they are considered one of the most aggressive fish for their size. I know it's only 1 foot long, but hearing how vicious it is, coupled with how ugly it is, and I really don't want to be anywhere near this thing. One cool thing about these fish though is that they have what is called ultra black skin, and it reduces the reflection of anything that is illuminated around them so that they can camouflage themselves easier in the darkness of the deep sea. In our number 2 spot today, we have the sea spider. Okay, if you're like me and don't like the spiders that exist on land, unfortunately this one is not going to be up your alley. Sea spiders are giant, and they like to suck the life out of their prey. Yeah, how terrifying and honestly gross. They basically just latch onto their prey for dear life and suck out all of the fluid that they possibly can. They are gross, but they technically aren't actually spiders. These guys have a leg span that is comparable to some of the largest land spiders, but the thing with these guys is that they carry their organs in their legs, because I mean they're basically all legs. The good news is that they prefer the really cold temperatures like the ones in the waters surrounding Antarctica, so unless you're planning on taking an icy cold plunge anytime soon, you're unlikely to encounter one of these creepy crawly sea creatures. In our number 1 spot today, we have the megamouth shark. These guys are a species of deep water shark that is rarely ever seen by humans, so there is so much about them that remains a total mystery. Since its discovery, which first came in 1976, there have been fewer than 100 specimens ever observed or caught. These guys are planktivorous, which means that they like to feed on planktonic foods. This leads to them swimming with their mouths wide open, and this, coupled with their extremely large heads and lips, makes them easily recognizable if you were to ever run into one on a casual trip to the deep sea. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the demon. There are many stories and alleged sightings of what is now referred to as the Black Demon of Cortez, which is said to be a massive black shark seen off of Mexico's Baja coast. One story in particular regarding this elusive shark comes from a fisherman named Eric Mack. He had reported that one day while sailing he felt his boat begin to rock, which immediately gave him the feeling something was awry. Eric was even further startled when he explained that he saw a massive towering tail sticking at least 5 feet out of the water. The stories of this shark are so infamous that it was even the focus of an episode of a History Channel show called Monster Quest. Maybe if there's a part 2 of this video, we'll talk about some more of the sightings around the demon. In our number 9 spot today, we have the prehistoric monster. Back in 1959, a fisherman named Tex Geddes and his friend James Gavin were boating somewhere just off of the coast of Scotland. It is said that during their their time out to sea, they encountered a sea monster that neither of them had ever seen before. They described its head as being sort of turtle-shaped, and that it was a quote hellish monster of prehistoric times, and said that it was breathing heavily through a quote large red gash of a mouth. Okay, not exactly a kind description, but definitely a bit of a terrifying one. I think it's important to bring up that we actually don't really know what megalodons look like. We have a sort of idea, but at the end of the day we only have some fossils, jaws, spines, teeth. It doesn't really leave us that much to work with. While it isn't quite clear what these two men saw for sure, and it's likely that we'll never know, whatever it was definitely wasn't just the average sea creature. In our number 8 spot today we have the TikTok shark. In May of last year, someone on TikTok called Alex Albrecht, who is a marine biodiversity student as well as a musician, shared a video on the app that had people seriously shocked. The TikTok shows a massive shark lurking around the ship that Alex was on, which is said to have been just off of the coast of Massachusetts at the time. The ship was full of research students when this massive shark made its appearance, many of which either screamed or had some sort of expletive in response. Another TikTok user asked in the comments if the shark in the video is a megalodon, considering how absolutely huge the thing was. Was this an actual megalodon? Likely not, but hey, I'm not the marine biodiversity student here, so who am I to say? In our number 7 spot today we have snorkeling. Robert Pamperin and a friend, Gerald Lair, were snorkeling off of La Jolla Cove in California in 1959 when Robert was attacked by a shark. It is said to have all happened quite quickly, and Gerald was alerted to the distress when he heard Robert scream. Gerald turned and saw Robert unusually high in the water, and his mask was missing. At this point Gerald dove under, and this is when he realized exactly what was going on. There was a shark that had Robert in its mouth up to his waist. Unfortunately, there really wasn't much that Gerald could do to stand up to this absolutely massive shark that he described as larger than your average great white. Robert sadly did not survive the event, and by the time rescuers arrived, they were only able to locate one of his fins. In our number 6 spot today we have the photographer. This is an encounter that occurred just last year in November, basically a year ago. Underwater photographer Darren Verbeck was diving off of the coast of Hawaii's Big Island when he saw what he thought was a school of fish. He began to get closer, I mean the whole photographer thing, and as he got closer he started to think that what he was actually seeing was a tiger shark. He got even closer, and that's when he said, quote, "I kept looking at the head. I'm like, that is not a tiger shark." And it got closer and closer, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger. Darren continued to get closer to the shark and estimated it to be over 15 feet, which is definitely quite large. He explained that the shark was not acting in a threatening way, so he continued to take his photos and shot as much as he could before the massive shark decided to swim away. Experts explained that the shark was likely in the area because of humpback whales, and honestly I don't want to see the shark that could take down one of those beasts. In our number 5 spot today we have deep blue. This shark is in fact not a megalodon, I'll just be honest about that, but it definitely is a more modern contender. Deep blue is the name of a great white shark who is most definitely one of the largest ever recorded, at least in our lifetime. This colossal monster is the largest great white shark ever caught on camera by scientists. She is measured to be 20 feet long, 8 feet high, and about 2.5 tons, and while this isn't all that huge compared to her massive prehistoric cousin, it certainly is no small feat. Rumors of her existence have been spread since as far back as the 1990s, but it wasn't until 2014 that she was officially caught on camera and documented. Researchers at the time were in the midst of studying tiger sharks, but she made her grand appearance after scavenging some food from a sperm whale carcass nearby. In our number 4 spot today we have the USS Indianapolis. This is a story that has been considered the worst shark attack in history, which is definitely a horrific thing to think about. In 1945, the USS Indianapolis was an unescorted US warship that was sailing in the Pacific when it was struck by a Japanese torpedo. This had no problem tearing the ship in two, which then meant that 900 sailors were now floating in the ocean waiting for rescue. Over the next 5 days, nearly 600 men lost their lives due to shark attacks. That's either a group of sharks or a few very large, very hungry ones. From the survivors' accounts of what happened over the course of those days, it seemed like an absolutely nightmare situation. This is exactly why it has gone on to be called one of the worst shark attacks in history. In our number 3 spot today we have Rodney Fox. Rodney Fox is a man who is thought of as one of the best spear fishermen in the world. In 1963 he was partaking in the Australian Spearfishing Championships, which were being held just south of Adelaide, when he went through what is widely regarded regarded as, again, one of the worst shark attacks in history. The shark he encountered bit him around the waist, which ended up puncturing his diaphragm, ripping his lungs, and crushing his rib cage. Not only this, but the attack left his organs exposed, so much so that when he finally made it back to shore, those rescuing him had to keep his wetsuit on to ensure that his insides actually stayed on the inside. Despite the fact that Rodney needed at least 4 hours of surgery and about 400 stitches, like many people who have had these sort of terrifying encounters, rather than shying away from sharks and the water, he leaned in. He actually became an advocate for sharks after this. He created the first underwater shark observatory and helped to dispel the rumors that sharks are bad, crazy, scary animals that we should all fear. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Jersey Shore. Back in 1916, during the summer season, there were 5 different shark attacks that occurred over the span of 10 days that ended up in the deaths of 4 people. This wasn't something that had been seen before in the area, which of course left people speculating as to why this was happening. There was a heat wave in the area during the time, which likely led to more people being out, enjoying summertime sort of activities, and maybe this attracted the shark, but in the end, no one knows for sure because no one even knows what kind of shark is responsible for the attacks in the first place. Luckily, this didn't go on to become a continuous trend, and whatever shark this was, it went on its merry way or perhaps found another source of food, but this series of attacks definitely kept the public on edge for the weeks and months surrounding. In our number 1 spot today, we have Watson and the Shark. For this one, we are headed all the way back to 1749 with a cabin boy named Brooke Watson. Brooke was swimming in the Havana harbor when he had his encounter with a shark. This one grabbed him by his right foot and dragged him underwater. The shark got a second chomp on his foot before a rescue boat was able to come and save him. The sailor on the boat managed to get the shark to back off enough that they could get Brooke out of the water. Brooke lost his lower leg, but his life was saved, which is absolutely the most important part. Brooke's story is not over, however, as he went on to become a member of Parliament and eventually Lord Mayor of England. He was so proud of himself for not only surviving a shark attack, but then going on to earn this title that he commissioned famous artist John Singleton Copley to create a painting called Watson and the Shark, which detailed his terrifying encounter and probably went on to scare a ton of people at the time. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the Zuyo Maru monster. This story is one that comes to us from 1977, and rather than an alive animal sighting, this one is actually this carcass that was found that we still aren't quite sure what it belongs to. The Zuyo Maru carcass was one that was found by Japanese fishermen near New Zealand. Because it was so unique, it was taken to be analyzed, and while many have speculated that it was a basking shark, that has never been confirmed or proven. Considering the fact that it was definitely shark-like, but just not quite clear as to what exactly it was, is definitely interesting. In our number 9 spot today, we have the sea creature. Back in both 1817 as well as 1819, there was a sea creature that visited the coast of Massachusetts, and it was seen by hundreds of people, but no one has been able to identify what it could have been for sure. The creature was said to be around 3 feet in diameter and around 50 feet long, and it is said that it moved similarly to how a whale or a dolphin might. The first sighting of this creature was when some fishermen spotted it, but the real panic began as the creature started to show itself closer to shore. To this day, some people swear that this was some sort of real sea monster, and others believe it was just a case of mass hysteria. What do you think? In our number 8 spot today, we have the prehistoric monster. Back in 1959, a fisherman named Tex Geddes and his friend James Gavin were boating somewhere just off of the coast of Scotland. It is said that during their time out to sea, they encountered a sea monster that neither of them had seen before. They described its head as being sort of turtle-shaped, and that it was a, quote, hellish monster of prehistoric times, and said that it was breathing heavily through a, quote, large red gash of a mouth. Okay, not exactly a kind description, but definitely a bit of a terrifying one. I think it's important to bring up that we don't actually know what megalodons looked like. We have a sort of idea, but at the end of the day, we only have fossils, jaws, and spines, and that doesn't leave us that much to work with. While it isn't quite clear what these two men saw for sure, and it's likely that we'll never know, whatever it was definitely wasn't just your average sea creature. In our number 7 spot today, we have Dr. Gru. When we think of the tales of sea monsters and myths, we often think of the many serpent-like creatures that just may be lurking lurking underneath the water. This is definitely a common theme, and in the 17th century there was a botanist who came up with a sort of explanation for these sea serpent sightings. It's important to note that this botanist was a very legitimate scientist who really worked to change basically everything we knew about plant anatomy, so when he came forth with this evidence and explanation, it rightfully caught people's attention. Basically, he had this specimen, which was a sample of skin that he said was from some sort of seal, but that it had a neck just as long as the rest of its body. Of course, this would explain a whole bunch of sea monster sightings, but in the end, the skin sample ended up completely disappearing, making any confirmation of the story or the animal's existence completely impossible. I know a megalodon isn't necessarily supposed to look like a seal with a long neck, but who's to say for sure that it doesn't? In our number 6 spot today we have the shipwreck. Back in 1909, the French steamer La Seine was out to sea when it collided with the British India steamer the Onda. A shipwreck is never good, but this one was particularly bad as, in heavy fog, the French ship sank in just 2 minutes. This of course left people stranded in the water, and I mean, you can probably see where this is going. In the aftermath of this wreck, while waiting for the rescue, there were 101 people who lost their lives from shark attacks. That's a lot of people. That is either a lot of sharks or a very few large ones. I mean, none of us were there, so it's hard to say for sure, but whatever really happened here, it's an absolutely horrifying tragedy. In our number 5 spot today we have the kayak encounter. Ida Parker and Kristen Orr were kayaking off of the coast of Plymouth in 2014 when they encountered a shark. This is truly a nightmare scenario, and it must have been absolutely terrifying. The pair, however, had actually set off with the intention of seeing a great white shark, and while it's likely that this is exactly what they encountered, they definitely did not expect what happened next. The two had heard of rumblings of a shark in the area that had swallowed a seal in one gulp, and this is what sparked their desire to head out on this journey. While out there, however, the shark began to attack their kayaks. In the end, both of them made it out alive, and when their kayaks were recovered, one was found with a huge bite mark in it. In our number 4 spot today we have the oldest shark attack. Considering the fact that the Megalodon is said to have been extinct somewhere over 2 million years ago, even evidence that seems ancient to us is a lot more recent than what our current understanding of their timeline here on Earth would suggest. That is exactly why the discovery of what is speculated to be the world's oldest evidence of a shark attack is very interesting. This discovery came by way of a 3,000-year-old human skeleton that is marked with different gashes and puncture wounds. It is said that because of the volume of wounds, it makes it slightly easier to tell the story of what happened. This is because while researchers first believed that perhaps the wounds were caused by metal weapons, this could not explain why there were so many in certain parts of the body. Another telltale sign is how this skeleton was discovered in Japan, which at the time of this person's life, there weren't really any metal weapons at that point in history in Japan, which ruled out this theory entirely. They were also able to rule out other terrestrial carnivores, and that's when they turned to marine life to look for some more answers. Because of the time it's been, we obviously don't know what creature was involved in this attack for sure, but with the mass amount of wounds found on the skeleton, it was likely to be something large and terrifying. In our number 3 spot today we have snorkeling. Robert Pamperin and a friend, Gerald Lair, were snorkeling off of La Jolla Cave in California in 1959 when Robert was attacked by a shark. It is said to have all happened quite quickly, and Gerald was alerted to the distress when he heard Robert scream. Gerald turned and saw Robert unusually high in the water, and his mask was missing. At this point, Gerald dove under, and this is when he realized exactly what was going on. There was a shark that had Robert in its mouth up to his waist. Unfortunately, there was not much Gerald could do to stand up to this absolutely massive shark that he described as larger than your average great white. Robert sadly did not survive the event, and by the time rescuers arrived, they were only able to locate one of his fins. In our number 2 spot today we have the Jersey Shore. Back in 1916, during the summer season, there were 5 different shark attacks that occurred over the span of 10 days that ended up in the deaths of 4 people. This wasn't something that had been seen before in the area, which of course left people speculating as to why. There was a heat wave in the area during the time, which likely led to more people being out enjoying summertime sort of activities, and maybe this attracted the shark, but in the end no one knows for sure because no one even knows what kind of shark is responsible for the attacks in the first place. Luckily, this didn't go on to become a continuous trend, and whatever shark this was went on its merry way, or perhaps found another food source, or whatever, but this series of attacks definitely kept the public on edge for the weeks and months surrounding. In our number 1 spot today, we have the USS Indianapolis. This is a story that has been considered the worst shark attack in history, which is definitely a horrific thing to think about. In 1945, the USS Indianapolis was an unescorted US warship that was sailing in the Pacific when it was struck by a Japanese torpedo. This had no problem tearing the ship in two, which meant that 900 sailors were now floating in the ocean waiting for rescue. Over the next 5 days, nearly 600 men lost their lives due to shark attacks. I said this about the other one that was similar to this, and I'll say it again. That's either a group of sharks or a very few large, very hungry ones. From the survivors' accounts of what happened over the course of those days, it seemed like an absolutely nightmare situation. This is exactly why this has gone on to be called one of the worst shark attacks in history. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the TikTok shark. In May of last year, someone on TikTok called Alex Albrecht, who is a marine biodiversity student as well as a musician, shared a video on the app that had people seriously shocked. The TikTok shows a massive shark lurking around the ship that Alex was on, which is said to have just been off of the coast of Massachusetts at the time. The ship was full of research students when this massive shark made its appearance, many of which either screamed or had some sort of expletive to say in response. Another TikTok user asked in the comments if the shark in the video is a Megalodon, considering how absolutely huge this thing was. Was this an actual Megalodon? Likely not, but hey, I'm not the marine life student here, so who am I to say? In our number 9 spot today, we have the CRAY fisherman. David Stead is an Australian naturalist, and in his book titled Sharks and Rays of the Australian Seas, he details an encounter with a shark that some have taken to believe is the legendary Megalodon herself. Apparently this incident happened in 1981 to a group of CRAY fishermen that David spoke with. These fishermen were absolutely terrified of a shark they saw in their fishing grounds, which were just off of Broughton Island. They were so scared, in fact, that they refused to return to the fishing spot for days. All the men agreed that the shark was monstrous and that it was most definitely a shark, not a whale. The men explained that they had never seen a shark of that size before, and considering how they were all seasoned fishermen who had all had their fair share of encounters with sharks, whales, and all of the terrifying things that the ocean has to offer, how frightened they were really did leave quite the impression. In our number 8 spot today, we have 2 specimens. This story comes from all the way back in 1869 when an Irish scientist headed out on an expedition to Seychelles. It is said that he went there to study fish, but man, he was not prepared for the specimens he would go on to study. It is said that he found one that was over 15 meters, which is already a whopping almost 50 feet, but the other one really took the cake. The second specimen it is said that he found was alleged to have been 23 meters long, which is a massive 75 feet. Since this was so long ago, there wasn't any official documentation of it, but if there had been, the second one would hold the record for being the largest ever recorded. That is absolutely wild. Seeing it is one thing, but imagine being able to actually study it. In our number 7 spot today, we have the sailors. This gigantic shark sighting is said to have taken place in the 1960s just off of the edge of Australia's Great Barrier Reef. According to author B.C. Cartmel in his book Let's Go Fossil Shark Tooth Hunting, the sailors involved in this sighting initially refused to talk about it because of the fear of being teased for being afraid of what they had seen. After some time, however, they began to speak about the incident. They explained that while on board their 85-foot ship, they needed to weigh anchor in order to conduct some engine repairs. While this was ongoing, the crew became absolutely shocked when they saw the biggest shark they had ever seen slowly swimming past their completely stuck ship. Just like the last one, all the men agreed that they were not mistaking a whale and that it was indeed a shark. They also said that this shark was so large it was rivaling the boat in size. That is absolutely massive. Whether it really was a Megalodon or not, whatever shark they saw that day certainly wasn't the average size. In our number 6 spot today, we have the battle scar. This story is a little different than the others on today's list, and it started with the sighting of a great white shark. This 15-foot long shark was spotted swimming just off of Isla Guadalupe in Mexico, but what was so striking about this great white in particular was the absolutely savage wound it had on its side. This huge bite mark shipwreck had people speculating as to what in the world could have caused it. I mean, there aren't very many predators to great whites, so it's a pretty rare occasion to see such a huge bite mark right on the side of one, and people were doubting whether or not another shark would have done this to one of its own species. There definitely are reasons for why this could have been an attack from another shark, but of course people took this as a possible sign that maybe there's something bigger lurking in the waters. If the Megalodon somehow isn't actually extinct and just manages to evade any sort of confirmation of its existence, it certainly would need a ton of food to survive, which makes big fish like great whites a perfect snack. The Megalodon is, however, one of the most powerful predators to have ever lived on our planet, so if this bite really was from a Megalodon, it's surprising that this great white made it out alive. In our number 5 spot today we have a world record. Basking sharks are known for being one of the largest fish in the ocean, and that is exactly why the largest one ever recorded was definitely something to write home about. In 1851, in the Bay of Fundy, which sits between New Brunswick and Nova Scotia here in Canada, a basking shark was caught in a herring net. This shark was measured to be at least 40 feet long, which is astoundingly large, and it certainly confused those who had caught it at first. I can imagine that they likely also thought that they had some kind of living fossil caught up in their net, but nope, instead they just set a new world record. In our number 4 spot today we have the demon. There are many stories and alleged sightings of what is now referred to as the quote black demon of Cortez, which is said to be a massive black shark seen off of Mexico's Baja coast. One story in particular regarding this elusive shark comes from a fisherman named Eric Mack. He had reported that one day while sailing he felt his boat begin to rock, which immediately gave him the feeling that something was awry. Eric was even further startled when he explained that he saw a massive towering tail sticking at least 5 feet out of the water. The stories of this shark are so infamous that it was even the focus of an episode of a History Channel show called Monster Quest. Maybe if there's a part 2 of this video we'll talk about some more of the sightings surrounding the demon. In our number 3 spot today we have deep blue. This shark is in fact not a megalodon, but it definitely is a more modern contender. Deep blue is the name of a great white shark who is most definitely one of the greatest ever recorded, at least in our lifetime. This colossal monster is the largest great white shark ever caught on camera by scientists. She is measured to be 20 feet long, 8 feet high, and about 2.5 tons, and while this isn't all that huge compared to her massive prehistoric cousin, it certainly is no small feat. Rumors of her existence have been spread since as far back as the 1990s, but it wasn't until 2014 that she was officially caught on camera and documented. Researchers at the time were in the midst of studying tiger sharks, but she made her grand appearance after scavenging some food from a sperm whale carcass nearby. In our number 2 spot today we have Bigger Than the Boat. Zane Grey is a man who is a novelist, and he is definitely best known for his adventure novels, but it is also said that he was a deep sea angler, and it was during one of his fishing adventures that his Megalodon sighting came. In the novel, which is titled Megalodon, Fact or Fiction, writer Rick Emmer speaks of this incident, saying that Zane claimed to have seen, quote, one of the man-eating monsters of the South Pacific. It is said that whatever kind of shark he saw, it was a shark that was much longer than his boat, which was somewhere from 30 to 40 feet. He also said that this shark was yellow and green, and that it had a few white spots. Most notably, however, he said that the shark had a massive square head, and that it had, quote, immense pectoral fins. This is all to say that whether he saw a Megalodon or not, whatever he saw was not just a harmless great white shark. What do you guys think? Perhaps a Megalodon sighting, or just one of the tall, exciting tales told by Mr. Grey? In our number 1 spot today we have the Mariana Trench sighting. A few years ago a video began circulating the internet, and it shows a gigantic shark scouring the seafloor. People online quickly put a story to the video saying that allegedly this is a Megalodon that was caught on camera at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. The creature is seen swimming over top of what is apparently an abandoned shark cage, and the video seems to be enough to have convinced many people. The video certainly is compelling, and whatever we see is most definitely terrifying to look at, but with my very limited knowledge of anything that lives in the sea, it's tough to say anything further. While some people swear that this is solid proof, others have brought up sharks that may have a similar appearance to the one seen in the video.